It's been a busy time in federal parliament with a number of bills and announcements that affect working people. Christodoulou is Union's New South Wales Assistant Secretary and he joins me for an update on what's been happening in Canberra. Chris, I understand there are big changes coming to the Fair Work Act. Can you walk us through those changes?
Yes, Emily. Look, as you know, there's been a lot of privatisation proposals and in fact implementations by various state governments around Australia, particularly here in New South Wales and Queensland. We've seen the privatisation of Sydney ferries, we've seen the privatisation of lotteries, we're going to see the privatisation of generators. What this legislation by the federal government will do is ensure that public servants who have their jobs privatised or outsourced will in fact not lose any of their wages and entitlements if they transfer to the new employer. So in the case of, if I just use this example, if there were cleaners employed by the Department of Health in New South Wales, if the state government decides to privatise those services, those cleaners will be able to move to the new employer, which will be a private for-profit employer, but will not lose their wages, their conditions and entitlements. And this is really, really important because one of the reasons the federal government's privatising and outsourcing is really to cut wages and conditions. So what the federal government's doing here with these new laws is to protect those workers' wages and conditions.
So it'll be a positive outcome?
It will be a very positive outcome, and it'll also be a barrier, I think. It'll make the state governments think twice about whether they want to go down this road of outsourcing and privatising. And it'll also mean that those companies coming in that want to do that work won't be able to tender on the basis of cutting wages and conditions.
There's also been some debate about union officials sitting on superannuation boards. What's this argument all about?
Look, there's been this big push by private for-profit insurance companies and banks to try to take over or take a bigger share of the superannuation market. As you know, the union movement many years ago set up industry superannuation funds where we had equal representation of union and employer trustees to oversee that money. They're non-profit organisations, and what's happened over the years is those funds have performed really well. The members in those funds have had good increases in their superannuation, and what's happened is they've stolen a lot of the market away from the banks and the insurance companies who were not returning as well to the people that were invested in those vehicles because they were paying commissions and all sorts of other fees. And so what we've seen now is this move by the private sector to try to destabilise the industry super funds by somehow arguing that it's inappropriate for unions to be on these boards. Well, it is very appropriate for unions and employers to be equally represented because, of course, they are the custodians of this money. They have no vested interest other than making sure that all those members receive a good return. And so we're fighting an action, I think, by the private sector to try to run false arguments about our representation.
And just finally, Chris, you're now a published poet. You've recently written a book.
Yes, I named it "Expressions of a Labour Movement Activist." It's basically a history of poetry that I've written over the years since I was 16, and a number of short articles and indeed some songs, and I've published it mainly to raise money for the Asbestos Diseases Foundation, so which, as you know, is a very good cause because lots of people now are being affected by asbestos-related diseases. And I was very proud that a number of unions, including Unions New South Wales, sponsored this book in order that we can turn it into a fundraiser.
And you've already raised a fair amount of money already?
Yeah, my aim is to raise about $15,000 in the next 12 months. I think we're up to about $8,000 or more now, so I'm pretty confident we'll get to the $15,000 mark, and I've received very good support, particularly from friends and fellow trade unionists, so that's been great.
Can you read me something quickly?
Okay, I will. I'll read you one poem. It's a short poem.
It's all written by you?
It's all written by me.
Okay.
It's a poem called Union. I actually just wrote this in 2011 when I was actually at Harvard University on a trade union course. So here we go. It says, we care for our families, we care for our friends. Our values stem from compassion, and its workers we defend. We agitate, we educate, we organise a throng to fight against injustice from the powerful and strong. Without our human passion, tyranny will succeed. A noose around the masses from excessive corporate greed. They will try to destroy us or just make us weak, but like those who fought before us, we will never turn the cheek. For without us around the world, democracy will cry, and freedom without workers' rights will simply be a lie. That is why in Labor Faith our commitment is our communion. With our collective strength and heads held high, we are proudly union.
Very impressive work, Chris. And of course, if you'd like to buy Chris's book, then you can go to the Union's New South Wales website.